Okay, I think we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see where everybody's coming and calling from. Berlin, I saw Nicaragua, Brazil, Tel Aviv, so many places over the entire world. This is going to be a wonderful webinar. We're talking about media mix modeling. We're talking about completing the user acquisition performance picture. It's super exciting. We have an amazing panel and obviously a super hot topic. We all know app tracking transparency from Apple was kind of the catalyst, right? But we should have known earlier, right? There's been a trend to privacy, which means granular deterministic marketing data tied to an individual. It's either gone or it's going away quickly. It doesn't matter if you're talking about IDFA, if you're talking about the Google Ad ID, maybe you're talking about third-party cookies. It's being replaced by aggregated data, sometimes deterministic, but not always, sometimes modeled. That transition so far on iOS has been pretty messy, right? It's been challenging, it's been hard, and it's forced marketers to think about other ways of getting the performance data that they absolutely need, what's working. One of those, of course, that they're thinking about is a 50-year-old technology or process or idea, media mix modeling. Today, in the context of performance mobile marketing, we're going to ask and answer, what can it do? What can't it do? How are marketers using it right now? And where does it fit in the mobile marketer's toolkit long term? Now, we often have amazing panels for Singular webinars. This one, it's all-star. We have Liz Emery, who's amazing from Tinuiti. She's the VP of Mobile and Ad Tech. I'm pretty sure, Liz, the first time you joined a Singular webinar, you were like a manager or director. There's got to be a correlation here. I don't know. Super happy to have you. We have Shamanth Rao. He is the founder and CEO of RocketShip HQ, does amazing work. He's going to talk about that today. Also has a really nice podcast. Check it out. We also are super happy to have Igor Skokin, who is the Director of Marketing Science for Meta. I'm guessing that Meta / Facebook knows a little bit about marketing, knows a little bit about science, knows a little bit about data, and he's going to share that with us today. And last not least, we have Eran Friedman, who's a CTO and co-founder at Singular, having built some of the highest throughput data systems on the planet. Okay, here's what we're going to do today. First of all, and we move to the next slide, please. We're going to briefly define our terms. What are we talking about when we're talking about MMM? What are we talking about when you're talking about incrementality? We're going to list the technologies and solutions you need to even think about getting started. We're going to share what it can do, MMM, what it can't do. We're going to talk about how accessible it is, who can use it, what you need for it, and maybe how accessible it will get for even small teams in the future. We're also going to look at real world usage right now, and we'll take out the crystal ball, we'll peer into the future. We will also answer your questions. So if you have questions, we want to hear them. There's Q&A functionality right down at the bottom of the screen. Use that. Please use that for your questions. Chat's there, but hey, not for the questions ideally. Use the Q&A and we will answer your questions. If we don't get to all of them, we do answer them later on the Singular blog. Okay. Before we get started, Eran, can you please introduce Singular? What is this company?
Yeah, of course, John. Hey, everyone. So Singular is the next generation attribution and analytics solution. Our product unifies data from audio marketing sources, connects it with the best measurement tools from SK network to media mix modeling, and provides insights to drive growth. We work with the top brands in the industry. You can see some of the logos here, and always feel free to hit us if you'd like to chat. That's all.
Thank you so much, Ron. Perfect. Okay, now to give our panelists a sense of how to approach their answers, let's begin with the first of 3 polls. Let's bring up the first poll right now. And the first poll is pretty simple. It's about what you're doing right now. It's coming up momentarily. The poll is, are you doing media mix modeling right now? Are we able to bring that up? I'm hoping we're going to bring that up. I'm stretching. Oh, and it's up. Awesome. There it is. Are you doing MMM right now? No, we're not. Hey, that's a valid answer. Thinking about it, also valid. Working on it for the future, actually started, brought some tools together, brought some data together. Or, hey, we are MMM wizards, bow before us. We will happily do that, by the way, and ask us your questions. So answer that if you can. Are you doing MMM right now? And let's see what those results are. No is 25%, thinking 28, working on it for the future, and 9% wizards. Wow, why are you here? We should have you on the panel. Excellent. Looking forward to it. Let's get started. Eran, kick us off by giving us traditionally, what do we mean by media mix modeling and incrementality?
Yeah, media mix modeling, or sometimes referred to as MMM, is a methodology that existed for a long while now. And traditionally, it was used by large advertisers, like I'm talking about like Fortune 100 companies who are basically trying to model the effect of their media spend on their overall revenue, sales, or general performance using statistical methods. Think about it as kind of like a top-down measurement framework. It takes your aggregated spend broken down by channel or country or any kind of segmentation that you have, any other ecosystem parameters of like what's happening in the market or any special events that you had, and then tries to output kind of the estimated ROI essentially on your marketing spend, and can also be helpful with budget allocation, all kinds of interesting insights on how are you performing and what should you do. Now, incrementality measurement that you've mentioned is kind of a different, kind of a connected question on trying to understand how truly incremental is your media spend. Or in other words, if you wouldn't have run that campaign, what would be the results then, right? Kind of a classic way to do incrementality testing is to run like an A/B test against an audience when one group sees an ad, another one doesn't see an ad, and basically trying to understand, okay, whether the users who saw an ad were actually incremental, they got a better result. But if you think about like how those tie together, you can think about it in two ways. In one way, MMM, kind of thinking about the top-down measurement, can try to answer incrementality questions, like whether your actual spend is truly incremental or not. But you can also use incremental testing to help your MMM model. So if you have like some ground truth testing that you're doing, you can feed that information to your MMM to calibrate it and make it more accurate. So both of these kind of play very well together, essentially.
Igor, maybe pop in here. You're doing some super interesting work at Meta on MMM. Anything to add?
Yeah, so hello everyone, and thank you, John. So as Meta, or Facebook before that, we have long advocated, like at first I'm going to mention incrementality. Like incrementality measurement, it is the gold standards, we believe, for making sure organizations recognize the effectiveness of their campaigns and their marketing activities. So we've seen successful advertisers who have applied incrementality throughout the funnel using the different tools that are available for it are the ones that we have seen perform better. So like incrementality for us is like the top of the the goal for the North Star for which we are trying to do. And on the other side, and as Eran mentioned, at its core, it's an experiment, as a test and control experiment. But we're also thinking about incrementality as a spectrum. So on one hand, we have the randomized control trials that are giving us the precise causality of marketing to outcomes, and MMM we think we consider as and on the other side we have some of the most basic attributions, let's say, or counting. MMM would be somewhere in the modeled incrementality. So MMM can be calibrated with incrementality. It gives us, it gives the baseline versus an incremental piece in a modeled way. So approaches the sort of incrementality from a different perspective, but it can be and should be calibrated with with ground truths obtained by experiments. We also sometimes refer to it as a marketing mix modeling, not just media mix, because MMM itself actually is much more powerful, and that's even the marketing bit is more like holistic business modeling. So it goes way beyond media, even way beyond marketing, into business drivers, price, distribution, other things, even weather, all kinds of things that impact business can be sort of included in the model and should be included in the modeling. So those two things I add.
Love it. Love it. I'm always conflicted. Is it media? Is it marketing? And I swap back and forth between the two. Thank you. Shamanth, I'd like you to ping in here. these are old technologies and techniques, but you're actually adapting them for digital marketing, mobile user acquisition. How have you evolved them to make that work?
Yeah, right. And, we really were prompted to move to MMM just because post ATT, everything's such a huge mess. Right. And I think, John, we perhaps talked in one of the earlier conversations about how we were seeing CPAs of like 1,000 plus, 500 plus, and it's just not meaningful. Right. So, that's what prompted us, and how we're adapting this is really there's a lot of media data that's already available. And especially if you're talking mobile apps, you don't need to rely on weather or prices or gas prices or consumer price index or what have you. Like Igor was saying, in an ideal world, all of that would be essential. But if you're downloading a mobile app, the sort of most critical actions typically happen within the first couple of days, the first purchase or the trial, if you will. So really adapting traditional media mix modeling to mobile or digital is a lot easier than it would be for Nike or Coke or what have you.
Super interesting, Shemant. I'm not sure if you're finished that or if you're just sort of cutting out there. Liz, anything to add? Because you're using that tool as well.
Yeah, I always like to level set this, that measurement used to really be based on, and I guess sometimes still is, individual platform dashboards or siloed views that don't always account for, external factors, don't account for what other channels are influencing it, different things like that. So these platform dashboards, they have the appearance of working, or that they have everything figured out in quotations there. But over time, like these solutions, like these individual dashboards have become less and less reliable, especially with signal loss impacting last touch, for example. So like kind of just adding on to what everyone said here is that we're in this privacy by default world, and we're going to continue to see more, right? We're like 3 months away from a couple of different state level legislations coming into effect. So without like user level data, we're seeing expansion of channels. These new models have this renewed spotlight, right? And in my mind, and at Tinuiti's mind, it makes sense to be executing on these models, to be thinking about these, because it closes the gap. And how these things have changed, they become easier to execute, and there's new ways to do it, which we'll touch on more in here, but it's just a very interesting time, especially in the mobile user acquisition world, to invest in these different models.
Liz, I want to stick with you for a second, because the history of MMM, as Aran mentioned, is Fortune 100 companies, huge spend, massive teams that can look at lots of different data and all this stuff. It's evolved beyond that, but who is MMM really for? Is it small, medium, large companies, one of the two of the two, three of the two, of the three, sorry?
Yeah, if this were multiple choice, I would select all of the above, but especially in like the privacy by default landscape, right? Like kind of how I look at it and how we look at it at Tinuiti is that if you're large, right, you can invest in this in different ways, right? You can customize it in very detailed ways when you're putting together MMMs. But when you're a smaller company, you can start small and still grow it. There are ways to approach it. Like I said, these models have changed and adapted to the ecosystem we're in now than when MMM first came out and there was this gold standard, but you needed X, Y, and Z to do it. It's a lot more customizable right now. So I always say, like, one of the things that my partner at work and I say is own the model, win the day for any size brand.
I love it. Liz always has a phrase. Boom. Own
Love
the
my
model, win
phrases.
the day.
I'm going to start a t-shirt company. We talk about this.
Jump in, Igor. I know you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's remarkable. So MMM is changing in the capable hands of the modern data science teams, and it's being transformed into this modern, powerful tool. And maybe concurring here, like every generation discovers rock and roll. So this is the kind of thing, right? That MMM is becoming now a very popular tool, and we see it works remarkably well for all businesses. It's very customizable, highly scalable, and there is progress to make it ever more open, transparent, and democratized. And we have many examples of, like, nobody is surprised with the large companies, as we said, but a lot of small companies who have adopted this this as a tool, and we through the work we do on the open source project Robin, we see a lot of this as a smaller in-house teams adopting this and able to generate meaningful insights in just a few days with relatively low pool.
Yeah, relatively low lift. Absolutely. Shimon, sounds like time to get you involved here because you're actually doing this. You're using Robin. You're doing a bunch of interesting things. What are the particularly challenging elements of MMM and incrementality for smaller teams?
Yeah, for smaller teams that typically don't want to work with a third-party tool because that can be somewhat expensive. If they want to run an MMM in-house, really getting it set up is, I think, a big lift. It's not impossible. We've done it with 0 programmers on our team. We've worked with an external consultant who's just helped our completely non-programmer team to get it set up. So it's definitely possible, but it's a bit of a heavy lift. Once you have it up and running, really making sure you're able to troubleshoot and make sure the model reflects something that's actually useful and helpful for your analysis. That's the other big piece. So you do need somebody that is dedicated to running these models and setting these up. That person doesn't have to be a programmer, though.
I'm taking that with a little grain of salt because I've heard you talk about using Python and you're doing some sophisticated data science. I get it. Somebody else has done the hard lifting, but you're not super non-technical either. I mean, you're a pretty smart dude. Liz, let's turn to you. Same sort of question. What are the particularly difficult parts of MMM and incrementality for smaller teams?
Yeah, and I don't want anything out of my mouth to scare people from doing this, right? Like these are just, he's asking me the question, I'm going to tell you. But for MMM, I think the hardest thing for smaller teams is the data requirements. It's not having the data, but is that data available? Is that data clean in a way that you can use it? Because MMM is not what we like to call a push button solution, right? As much as we would love it to be a push button solution, there's a lot of manual work that goes into it. So I would say that data piece is probably the heavier lift that I see for smaller teams that we work with at Tinuiti that are working to set things up. It's that manual work there. For incrementality, the biggest thing I say is that smaller teams, smaller clients, you can do this. Like you can do this kind of stuff like all day. The biggest things, and again, I recommend that you do. Like if you have the opportunity, run incrementality, whether that's always on or one-off. But like the biggest thing is that this model doesn't take into account like, certain external factors that MMM does. It's really hard, like the cause and effect. There's a lot of variables that aren't always super clear. So with incrementality, I would say you want to use it in conjunction with other models. And remember, can be directional because it's hard to isolate everything with incrementality. So I would say just having the right lens when you run incrementality as a smaller team is probably the biggest challenge because, it's a model you can run right now. It's a model you can run tomorrow. They're quick, executable, but just making sure that as a small team, you have the right lens on the data you're receiving.
Yeah, it is super interesting, Liz. And I would just say one thing that I would add is that if you're going to do some incrementality, you're going to go hardcore with that. Talk to your entire company, like your leadership structure, and say, we are pausing this stuff here. Be aware so that when we try this, we know what's going to actually happen here. It may have a detrimental impact initially. We're going to get good data. Aran, I saw you nodding while Liz was talking about data. I had to come to you.
Yeah, I have to echo everything Liz said. Like the big kind of first challenge is like getting the data right to really cover everything for MMM. And one of the important things in MMM is that you need to get all the factors basically included in. So if you're kind of only taking in, some of the main channels, but you're actually running some influencer marketing at the same time, and they're not in the model, you're gonna get some weird numbers without realizing that there's like another factor just changing everything, right? So it's really important to have 100% of your spend covered and your results as well. And then once you have that, I think part of the next challenge is understanding what kind of external factors can really affect things that are even beyond your control. I think Igor kind of mentioned it earlier, like if there's like, in kind of traditional sense, it was like, well, whether the weather has changed, for example, right? Or like holiday seasons. Obviously, in the app ecosystem, those things can be very different, like whether a particular app outside of your own suddenly got a lot of got featured, and that kind of shifted some of the effect of your spend, for example, or the general CPMs in the industry. So there are market trends out there that can also affect your numbers and might be challenging to kind of understand how they contribute to the model. So definitely a lot of things to keep in mind to get to the best MMM model there.
Great insights. I love the one about influencers. You paid a guy 2 months ago and all of a sudden the video comes out on TikTok like 3 months later, and then it goes viral 4 months later. And what the heck is going on? Igor, I want to turn to you. Are there elements of MMM or incrementality that are easy to implement, even for small team?
I think I'm just gonna keep this brief. I would say just get started, organize your data. I think that's like, just what Aaron and Liz said. And with the incrementality testing, just start getting to the habit of doing it. And then once you have some, once you have some data and once you have some tests, it's, the tech exists. And as Shaman was saying, yes, you need to be able to run some code, but you don't have to be, an extremely, I don't know, it's some analysts with normal level of skills are able to run this kind of analysis, as long as you have the data and the tests ready at hand. So I think it's one of those things to just get started and collect the data, organize the data, and get going.
Shemant, let's bring you in. How do you just get started? What's a good starting point for a small team?
Yeah, you can build basic spreadsheet-based models. That's always the best starting point. In fact, we have a couple of YouTube videos on where we basically walk people through how to build a spreadsheet-based model. And the next, once you're past that, you can use open source stuff like Robin, which Igor was mentioning. We use Robin pretty much consistently across all of our bigger accounts, right? And Robin's really, once you have it set up, as I was saying, you can have it be running even with somebody that isn't like a hardcore programmer, really. I would say those would be the first couple of steps. And for people who kind of doubt it, we have YouTube videos so people can check out how to set up Robin, how to set up a spreadsheet-based MMM as well.
MMM in 3 easy steps. Actually, you've got great videos, so I do recommend them. Igor, let's turn to you. We've talked about confounding variables. The economy tanks. It gets really, really hot. A storm's coming, right? And maybe your weather app and that matters, right? Or other things like that. How do you separate out all these confounding variables that can change your marketing without, not even talking about the spend that you're doing?
Yeah, I think we have to recognize a couple of things there, right? So first of all, so the modeling is not magic as well, right? So there are some things that if 2 things are moving in the same direction at all times and they are not separable, then you cannot really separate them. But at the same time, if you do have, for example, 2 factors that move in the same time, but on one you are able to, for example, influence it or run a test or change some variable and introduce variability into your advertising, because often it's not only about running tests. You could, for example, switch off a channel for a couple of days, or increase intensity somewhere else and decrease intensity somewhere else, and then introduce variability into your factors, so you can actually measure them. But then as I'm saying, if there are some channels that you cannot, then you cannot. But through testing and through introduction of clever frameworks. So there is also clever math, like the Bayesian math that you can use, or time varying parameter models. So there are a lot of this stuff has been addressed, and there is some literature or open source codes or some of the providers are looking into this. But simply put, you need variation. You need variation in the data to measure it. MMM is a backward-looking analysis. So as long as there is enough variation in the channels, then you are able to get a read on them. If in doubt about certain channel, definitely run a test and understand the incrementality and use it to calibrate the model.
I love what you just said there, Igor, because sometimes when you look at incrementality testing, you think, oh, shoot, I got to turn everything off and just do this one thing. Or you think about the complexities of all, you're saying just vary it. go heavy
Right.
here, then go heavy there. That's an
100%
easy
here,
entry.
100% there. You can do regions, regionalize, depends on like all different games or different portfolio. You can look at different ways to do this, and try to kind of introduce variability in your data set.
That's an easy way to start. Okay, we're almost ready to start talking about some of the best and worst case scenarios that we can expect from these solutions, Ron, but let's end this section by saying if somebody wants to start the MMM journey, what are the table stakes for getting started? What do they need?
Right, you want to start by making sure you have all the data right? So you need to make sure you have all the aggregated spend, like making sure it covers everything that you can imagine, and need to be like accurate as possible, and as much data as possible, enough history to rely on. You want to obviously have your total performance. So usually in our world, it will be kind of like cohorted revenue, for example, for the users, so you can actually understand the effect, and any additional external factors that you can think of like as these. Those three components are going to be inputs to the media mix model that you're building. With that, then there's like a variety of open source tools and frameworks that can help you kind of get started. Some of these are actually like, for example, Robin by Meta, which is a great framework. There are other alternatives as well. But basically, like everyone said here, start with something and you can definitely iterate moving forward. Obviously, if you're a singular customer, this is something that we're also working on, and we'll be happy to explore this together.
Wonderful. Okay, let's bring up our second poll. The second poll, if we can bring that up right now, is going to be around incrementality. And that one, it's up. How do you account for incrementality? And the answers are, hey, we don't. The second one is sort of data-driven guesstimation. We kind of guess a little bit. We kind of, fudge it, maybe. Third option, full meal deal, baby. Lift tests, experiments, all that stuff. And fourth option, we have a SaaS tool and or a tech partner. So if you can answer that now, that would be great. Let's pull those answers up. What have we got? And they're coming up. We don't, 21%. Guesstimation, 35%. Full meal deal. That is higher than I anticipated. Wow. Respect. Congratulations. Excellent. And 7%, you have some sort of SaaS tool and or tech partner. Excellent. Okay. So Shamanth, want to start with you. We want to talk about, hey, there's a lot of interest in the promise of privacy safe aggregate measurement, MMM, that we've been talking about. But you said before there's more interest in adoption. Why is that?
I think most of us mobile marketers grew up, if you will, with D7 ROAS and behave that's based on deterministic attribution. Right? That's been around for a decade. That's what the reporting is always featured. And now if you're like, oh, we're going to look at the share of budgets, or, we're going to run 5 different models. It's not even like speaking the same language, if you will, right? Also, it just requires a different skill set, right? Like I said, we had to muck around with a bunch of code. Like, we're not programmers, but we had to muck around with code. We had to understand which models to use. We have to understand what kind of inputs go and what kind of outputs come in, you get out. So it's just a different skill set altogether, which I think is why there's been much more interest. The interest is just because the normal deterministic isn't working. It's such a huge mess, but there's still some hesitation in adoption just because it's just a different ball game altogether.
Excellent. We're going to continue on, and Liz, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I'm just going to mention to everybody, hey, we've got 14 questions right now in Q&A. I'm sure there's more. If you have a question you'd like to ask Igor or Liz or Shamanth or Ron, pop it in there in the Q&A right down at the bottom. We will get to those at the end, or we'll answer them on the Singular blog. Okay, Liz, turning to you. Best case scenario, you have all the data you need. You got most of your confounding variables sorted, all that stuff. What can MMM deliver? What can you promise your CEO that you're going to get?
Yeah, I think there's a phrase that we use, and my phrase is, but honestly, like using MMM, the best fit is that you can use your past marketing performance to influence your future ROI. So not only that, but like you can do that by optimizing your allocation by channel, by tactic, and that's not just digital landscape, that's traditional as well, right? So it's that full spectrum influence in terms of optimizing promotions, pricing, competitor spend. You just have so much insight at your disposal when you do your MMM as like a best case scenario to influence overall. So like for us at Tinuiti, we recommend MMM across the board. So it's obviously a strong fit for mobile and mobile app clients, but really all brands right now, again, because obviously you always hear me talk about privacy, but where we're headed, it just makes really strong sense. Doesn't matter, small, medium, large.
Shamanth, what level of accuracy can you attain?
It's very much a function of the volume of data, but I would say even for smaller clients we work with, we see R-square of like 92%. Right, that's like the minimum we try to look at. So it's definitely, I would say we do see very strong accuracy that informs a lot of our decisions.
Igor, turn to you for a moment. What can MMM deliver that you can't get elsewhere?
Sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong unmute thingy. Yes, so I think achieving parity with what currently I guess the UAs see is probably like the first step. So MMM is somewhere in between like the true lift and the last touch, right? But I think it started to become really interesting once you start digging into the other things that MMM can give us. Competitive intel, insights on, I don't know, game launches and cannibalization from within portfolio, things that we couldn't probably measure before, and also the macro level impact. So like, first of all, you get what you were used to get, but then plus you start getting other things. But I have to say it here again, and I think it's going to be in one of those slides at the end, like what is the key insights or key takeaways. So MMM is not, a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. We believe that advertisers need a mix of complementary solutions, and that is attribution, experimentation, and modeling, mix of approaches. And every company needs to figure out what works for them. There is not even a single template or a right balance between these methodologies. Every company should figure out what works for them, for their budget, for their strategy and tactics. MMM is uber powerful tool, but it's not the only one, and should be used in a complementary fashion. So that's the best case. MMM can provide the strategic and tactical. It can have more channels with more sensitivity. It can be agile. You can run it 3 times per week. You can run it every day. Depends on how much do you actually need it and want it. So really kind of echoing what both Eran and Liz just said a minute ago, but that's the right balance needs to be achieved for each individual company, in fact.
Well, it's very sad news. There's no silver bullet. I like silver bullets. I love silver bullets. I want silver bullets. And those are the only kinds of bullets I ever want, actually. But anyways, no silver bullet. Got it. Eran, turning to you, where does MMM not fit? What does it not do?
Yes, so I think part of the challenge with MMM is with the very, very granular, very tactical kind of decision making. So, it's difficult to get insights, for example, like at the creative level ROI, very, very detailed or nuanced items. Of course, if you have a lot of data, if you're running like creatives at scale, or like you're kind of tweaking everything, or like running with tests, then you can optimize things. But generally speaking, usually it would be easier to see kind of a solution from the other methods, such as a deterministic attribution versus MMM for the operational daily stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the challenge. I think it really ties with what Igor said earlier, right? So if you want to really get like the most holistic solutions, you really need to use like multiple methods to get the most accuracy and the most insight, right? And sometimes you need to MMM to kind of understand your holistic understanding, but you need to kind of calibrate it and add additional insights from the bottoms up kind of approach, right? And ties these together. That's kind of from what I've seen works the best.
Liz, same question. Where would you not use MMM?
Yeah, well, I think that Igor and Eran, they nailed it for me. A couple little things to add on to the granularity.
With silver nails,
I'm telling you, I was like, this is easy. I'm just going to sit here. A couple of little things to add on to it is that a couple big pieces missing is like obviously branding and messaging impact isn't included within the MMM world as it stands right now. Customer journey is a little bit murky again in that MMM world. And one of the biggest caveats in that it's getting better, it's progressing, but it can be biased to offline channels. Because if you think about when it was built, right? When it was built, what existed in that time frame to where we are now. And it, like I said, I've always liked MMMs as like a gold standard, and it used to be the gold standard of how we do things. It's evolving, but there are still those biases that we're tweaking on that you have to pay attention to as you're setting these things up, right? Like in our marketing science team within Tinuiti, when we build these things, we're making sure to account for certain biases as we set up the factors that go into it.
Wonderful. Thank you. By the way, I totally lied before when I said there were 14 questions. I was only looking at one category. We have right now, I think 34. So there's room for more. Go ahead and ask them. Eran, I want to turn to you. Singular has recently introduced this concept of hybrid measurement. What is that? And how do MMM and incrementality fit into that?
Right. So Gadi, our CEO, actually just recently published a blog post on our view on what we call the hybrid measurement approach. And the idea, which really connected with everything that everyone said here, is that with all the different methods out there, like if you try to zoom out, there's like SKN network and probabilistic and device level data and incrementality testing and MMM. Again, there isn't a single framework, there isn't a silver bullet that you can really run your entire marketing operation on. So as we see kind of the future, instead of relying on a single method to base all your work on, in our view, the future is gonna have to require multiple methodologies. And it's really the combination of these solutions that's gonna provide the most actionable and insightful measurements. So think about all the data and signals available from all these networks, for all these measurement methods, from a unified infrastructure that can really enable you, like basically the best of our things, like relying on kind of the bottoms up methods, like the deterministic attribution or scan network or anything, because you need that for the operational work and to calibrate things. And you need to rely on model data and incrementality testing and kind of build your MMM framework on top of that. And really kind of the combination of these is gonna provide the best insight moving forward. And that's kind of where we see the industry is headed, is where Singular honestly is investing in.
So that's the silver bullet.
Yeah, pretty dream-like silver bullets, composed of many, many tiny silver bullets. But, yeah, for sure.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, let's bring up the third poll. The third poll is going to be about what you're planning to do in the next 12 to 24 months. So if you're already doing it, then take that into account. You'll still be doing it. Let's bring up the poll now. The question is, will you be doing MMM and or incrementality in the next 12 to 24 months? Here's the poll. No, not worth it. Valid response if that's what you believe. We're on the fence, getting splinters, of course. Most likely yes. Or dude, we are already there. So pick your answer. No, not worth it. On the fence, yes, or dude, already there. And let's see what those answers come back as. Here they come. Wow. 97% of you are doing it, planning it, they're already, or on the fence getting splinters. That is amazing. Interesting. 3%, love to chat with you as well. Could be totally valid in your circumstance. Absolutely. Most likely, yes, is the bulk, the majority here, 60%. Okay, now we're moving into real life. Shamanth, returning to you. Share a couple, maybe one real world example that you used MMM and what you learned from it.
Yeah, right. So this is for a subscription app we're working with. We've had somewhat fairly significant spend, and we ran the MMM to understand, look, what the ideal share of spend should be and what the true value of trials was. And we use trials just because that's what happens in the first 24 hours. It's a much better sort of dependent variable than, let's just say, revenues or purchases, which can be influenced by renewals. So we started with trials, right? And one of the big, I think what we realized was, for something like Google, where you're just basically trusting Google reported numbers on iOS, numbers look wildly optimistic. That numbers look crazy because Firebase, they're the referee and the player. and the obviously numbers look very, very good. It turned out we were spending way more than we should have been. And when we did cut the budget, we just saw like no change in the overall trials baseline. We're like, guys, we just cut your budgets on Google 6% because the analysis said Google wasn't driving anything incremental. Your trials just haven't changed. Nothing's moved. And that was, I think, just a huge, huge win. And we could just, I think that's one
What a
example
win.
that comes to mind. Yeah.
What a win. Absolutely. You're spending potentially millions of dollars a month on a place that's not actually driving incremental activity. And you learned that. Impressive. Liz, a real world example?
Yeah. So in my role, I work across mobile app, but I also work across a lot of cross-channel clients. We had one that was in the fintech space, a fintech app. And as all the different changes happened with signal loss, especially in the mobile world, all of a sudden our price points and how things looked didn't look so great, right? Just because of all the new limitations and changes. And we were able to leverage, and this goes back to the conversation earlier about those hybrid solutions. We were able to actually leverage a combination of an MMM that we had built with them out of Tinuiti, some incrementality tested and projected models to close that gap. And as we implemented these models, we were able to change around exactly where they were executing in terms of their budgets to get them a much higher return. We were able to actually prove out which channels worked, and we were also able to take into account environmental factors that set up our client to go to their board and have this conversation in a much stronger way, right? Because not only was it COVID and recession and unemployment numbers and all these different things at the time period, but on top of that, there was signal loss, right? So we were able to use everything we had in our disposal by doing that silver bullet, unified measurement or combination of solutions to close that gap. And it was a major success for that client internally with their leadership, but also for us at Tinuiti to prove like, hey, here is the value when you use the right combination of measurement solutions for you, because there is no one size fits all. You need these little bit of pieces of everything.
So impressive, because I'm just finishing up a report right now on what's happening in mobile advertising, where spend is trending, what's going on, what's happening. And it's so bloody hard to figure out why, because we've had a COVID bulge. Is that coming down? Are we reverting back to the mean? Is the mean an upward trajectory here? Is it the recession? Is it inflation? Is it other things that are going on? There's so much happening in the world right now. It's really, really challenging. Briefly, Liz, role for first-party data in this?
I mean, there's just a renewed spotlight on the power of first-party data as signal loss, continues to increase. But there really are it's always been, I guess, data has always been the strongest signal in my mind, or one of the most important signals. And basically data is the foundation. Really, marketing has really shifted in the last 10 years. Like 10 years ago, we've been relying on third-party signals, and now we're shifting back, right? So it's just that renewed spotlight. We're moving back to a time where it's a stronger foundation than we've been walking on for 10 years now.
And Iran, that's got to be huge, right? Because if you have an SDK in somebody's app and you can see actual use, actual purchase, actual signups, all that stuff that they've instrumented, then okay, stuff is happening out here in the world. Here's what's actually happening inside, correct?
Exactly. First party data is critical to ensure kind of the accuracy of your model. You can use that for so many things, including for tests, for ground kind of control, and making sure that your MMM is as accurate as possible. So, as always, first party data is gold, right? The more you can you have it, the better it is for everything, basically.
Igor, I want to turn to you. One of the challenges with Eminem, the rock star, no, the rapper. One of the challenges with MMM is you've got confounding variables that you have to adjust for. How do you ensure that when you're adjusting for some of these, you're not just artificially tweaking your model to fit reality and kind of fooling yourself?
Yes. So there are, so using automated MMMs or SaaS or data-driven. So, okay, maybe one step back. So like how models have been traditionally built have been by an analyst, by hand, very crafty. People have been, spending days and maybe even weeks try to test different variables and combinations of the different transformations and so on. We see that, the data-driven or semi-automated or automated MMM can help reduce this kind of decisioning complexity and can actually minimize a human bias in certain instances, try to run all kinds of combinations of the variables and the transformations to find the right, sort of combination of it. We're not fully there yet that it could be fully decoupled from the human skill set and try to like look at the entire system, at least for now, and find that sort of balance between it. But like we're massively sort of minimizing it from the craft only black box type solution to a much more open, transparent, and customized, semi-automated, experiment calibrated system. But the real answer to this question, in my opinion, is whether you're doing it in-house or through a partner, is really important to put actionability at the core. So like request forecasting and simulations to be done to verify accuracy of models over time, because only that's how you're going to find that it actually works. If you are having a often we get asked, how can we show that the modeling itself is worth the investment, for example, right? And like we say that the only worth if you take positive actions of the results of the modeling. And that means that when you're doing in-house or through a partner, you have to be clear why you're modeling, and then put actionability at the core. And is it a planning tool to help you budget session? Is it a campaign measurement tool? Do you want to understand the macro factors? Is it the defense mechanism for your finance team? I know it could be all sorts of things, right? But making sure that we've seen the very best operations when actionability is at the core, and frequent simulations are made to verify accuracy over time.
Igor, 100% nailed it. I mean, everybody can make the past make sense. If you can make predictions about the future that have truthfulness to them and accuracy, and you can test that and see that, boom, then you've got something, you've done something impressive. Okay, we're nearing the end, but we have a couple important things left. One, we're going to ask for predictions on MMM from all the panelists. Two, we've got one more poll. Three, we've got a key takeaway from each marketer. And fourth, and maybe most importantly, we're going to answer some of your questions. Okay, this is prediction time. You have to answer in like a minute. You each get like a minute, okay? So the question is this: when will MMM be a core part of the majority of digital marketers' toolkits? When will MMM be a core part of the majority of digital marketers' toolkits? Liz, 60 seconds.
Yeah, we're seeing it now, even if it's just a conversation on budgets, planning, inputs, but we expect by the end of 2023 for it to be a core piece.
Extra points for using less than your 60 seconds. Igor, 60 seconds.
I think we have seen significant evolution over the last 12 to 18 months. So specifically, we foresee the same going forward. So in the next 12 to 18 months, I think this will become more firm core part of digital marketer solutions.
Excellent. Shamanth, your prediction.
Yeah, definitely expect increasing
You're
interest
muted,
in
Shamanth.
adoption.
It was amazing, but what is it?
Yeah, definitely expect.
You are still muted, my friend.
No.
We will come back to you.
I can actually hear Shamanth. So John, you might be missing.
Okay.
Yeah, very good, Shamanth.
Definitely see significant
No.
adoption. No.
Go ahead, Shamanth.
Okay.
We can hear you.
All right.
Good.
Yeah, definitely see significant adoption getting into the new year. A lot of folks are already asking us and actually using MMM-based insights in their day-to-day reporting among folks we work with. And I think, as Igor suggested, it's really one part of the puzzle. We do look at channel reported numbers and complement it with MMM reported numbers. So it's already a part of our reporting cadence, and I definitely see that become increasingly the case as we go forward.
Excellent. Eran, your answer, your prediction.
Yeah, so I think it's hard for me to imagine that the majority of marketers would move towards MMM 2023, but we definitely, based on the poll results, we see that there is huge interest there, and I definitely predict that we're going to see a massive shift towards it in 2023 for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's bring up our fourth and last poll. And this poll is a little different. We won't show the results here. This is, do you want to be at the next Singular webinar? This one is on user acquisition through a recession with StoreMaven, Liftoff, and Inkit. Would you like us to auto register you for it? If you say yes, please, you'll be auto registered. You'll get an invite, blah, blah, blah. If you say no, thank you, we won't bother you. There you go. Please answer. And when you're done answering, that is great. That will go away. Okay, let's dismiss that poll and bring up the slides. Slide 4, starting with Igor. And this is the key takeaway. This is the key takeaway that each panelist will have for you. Igor, what is your key takeaway on MMM and incrementality?
Yeah, so I think it's really about, with the rapidly changing environment, we see advertisers leveraging many different tools with many different levels of aggregation, speed, biases, data holes, and calibrating them against each other. This alone, requires a sort of agile approach and, diversity of analytical skills. But the benefits are really to performance improvement across the whole. So use what you have. Every advertiser needs to find their balance between these methodologies to be best positioned for success.
Excellent. Liz, your key takeaway.
Yeah, I think we've said it a lot, and I can't see it on the screen, but what I remember writing was that there's no one size fits all solution right now, right? Like, there it goes. In the privacy by default landscape that we're in, you're going to need a combination of durable solutions. And like I said, you don't have to break the bank doing this. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, that this is going to cost me so much money, I need to stick in my lanes. There are ways to do this financially responsible, but still having the right combination of solutions for your size of business.
Wonderful. Shamanth.
Yeah. Again, try to understand what the true value of your marketing spend is, because it's definitely not what the dashboards tell you. Definitely not after ATT.
I love the second part of yours, which is to learn to let go of the certainty of deterministic measurement. That is interesting. I was talking to a marketer about that a couple of weeks ago. They're saying it's kind of freeing, actually. I was saying, and maybe the 3 martini lunches will come back too. Who knows? Eran, your key takeaway.
Right. So really kind of connecting with what everyone said so far. So it's not going to be like a single measurement method here. It's not going to be only MMM that's going to save everything. You're really going to have to use kind of a combination of our signals, kind of our approach of the hybrid measurement that we strongly believe in, and think about how you can get more and more signals and trying to get to kind of that holistic decision from it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And now we turn to the questions from the audience. And of course, that's the section that I love the most, and hopefully you do as well. There's a bunch in there that, I think we've already answered, like Satya asked, what techniques are available to validate an MMM model? Well, Igor answered that. He said, hey, make predictions. If they come true, you validated it. Keep making predictions and see how it goes, right? Gotti says, how can you incorporate MMM or incremental in daily optimization of campaigns? And Eran kind of said, well, that's not exactly what it's for. Try and stay away from that. I will ask this one. It's for Liz from anonymous attendee. What legislation were you referring to? You mentioned several states were bringing out privacy focused legislation. Briefly, what were you talking about there?
Yeah, in January of next year, you're going to have at least 4 or 5 state level legislations coming into effect and being enforced. The easiest example to find is the CPRA that's in California. And essentially, how I look at things is that it's basically bringing us closer to GDPR in Europe. Like, these legislations are cracking down, especially on the data front. So I would say paying attention to those and making sure you're compliant is something you should be doing now if you're not, because all of this feeds your models, right? All of it feeds your marketing, your models. So locking those things down, and there's agencies and companies that can help you with that. And then the other one I would say is that thinking about, I always say this, it's a really good comparison, is that Europe is very much opt in. You have to opt into, being tracked, whereas the US is, we call it opt out. So it's a very unique landscape, but I would say pay attention to state level. Colorado, Virginia, California, 3 off the top of my head. January 2023, they're coming in hot. So be on the lookout.
Oh man, if it's not complicated enough, now you have to worry about what state somebody comes from to be compliant. Excellent, great. Iran, turning to you, question from Magali, who says, how can my MMP help with MMM? Great acronym.
Right, so already, yep. So we're already providing the unified infrastructure to provide you all the data, right? So we're getting all the spend across all your channels. We're getting all the results that you're having, or the correlated revenue, or basically the performance KPIs that you're looking for. And we also see all the market trends, right? Any kind of external factors that might affect your numbers. So basically, as we see it, we can build like the entire stack from providing the cleanest data to providing even the insights based on the model results. We're happy to talk more about that if you're interested to learn more about our approach.
Great answer and greatly brief. That's wonderful on both counts. My favorite mobile marketer, Sherry Lynn, is asking, does MMM work during extraordinary circumstances like a pandemic? We'll give that, easy layup answer to Igor, right? I mean, we'll give you the easy ones, Igor. Does MMM work during extraordinary circumstances like a pandemic?
We have actually last summer, we have actually published a blog post and an article about how modeling can be set up for extraordinary events. I mean, it's not, again, in the forecast of things, like, I mean, no one could have like forecasted what this is going to happen, but you can definitely account for it in the models once you are building. So there are various ways, various data sources, various techniques that can be deployed to account for the impact of the pandemic itself. So John, I will later, or Sadi or someone, I'm going to send you the link. Maybe you can pass it on to Sherry.
We will add that. We will add that to the blog post and we'll send that right to Sherry. That's perfect. Awesome. If you find the link, you can put it in chat here as well. So you have a little bit of time, because I'm going to ask the next question to Shemant. This is from Jess. Can MMM be used for media testing insights? So can you make predictions or assumptions and then test them with MMM? Shemant, your answer?
Yeah, yes. And you have to make the assumption, of course, that your historical performance is a good predictor of your future performance, right? Like in the Google example that I gave, we were like, oh, according to the model, Google's just not adding any trials. And we turned it off and it was as predicted. So yes, assuming your future is similar to your past, yes.
Excellent. Got a question here from Dionysius. MMM can be used for retail and brick and mortar sales as well. And I'm guessing that answer is yes, because it's kind of come where it's from. Liz, am I accurate there?
Yes. Yeah. The easy one. Yes one. I would say I look at the factors of MMM as like 3 buckets. Marketing factors, that's like your media and your non-media. Non-marketing factors, that's like economics, competitor performance, weather, holidays, what's going on in the world. And then the third bucket is what I call the error bucket, because no model is perfect. So there's always like a margin for error, but yes, 100% to that question.
Wow, never say again, I only give you the tough ones. Wow. Here's another one from anonymous attendee. If you're looking at spend by network as a factor, how do you deal with the ebb and flow of organic users for your app? I'm going to send that one to Shemant.
You can factor in organics as an independent variable in your models, and at least Robin, which is what we use. So you can and should absolutely use non-paid variables.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to end there because frankly, we've run out of time, but I have to say, first of all, thank you attendees for joining. Really do appreciate it. Thank you for your questions. The ones we didn't answer, we'll answer on the Singular blog. Have to thank each panelist. This has been amazing. It's been incredible. Liz, as always, insightful, concise, impressive. Thank you so much. Shemant, really do appreciate it. Real world expertise, expertly communicated. Igor, thank you so much for taking everything you're learning. I mean, the masses of data that you must have at your disposal and the work that you've been doing there has got to be unbelievable and insane and impressive. Thank you for sharing it here. And Ron, as always, thank you again for everything that you've been able to share with us. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day and see you next time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.